Hello interwebs, I hope you're doing well. Bit of an impromptu video today that I didn't intend to make, but I feel would be very remiss of me to not make, considering how important and scary and dangerous I feel this topic is going to be, because something happened earlier this week in the state of Tennessee, a bill that was passed that is expressly anti-transgender, that I think is deeply harmful, deeply horrifying, and deeply concerning for what I think it shows in terms of the direction of trans rights, not only within Tennessee, but in many conservative parts of the United States, as well as just the United States in general, and sort of sentiments against trans people just in general within, Western societies. I think mainly of the United States and the United Kingdom, but certainly in many countries around the world as well, in terms of how trans identity has been so politicized and so used as a scapegoat in this ongoing culture war that we have going on in our world right now, especially in countries like my own, that has been so expressly coming out on trans people recently, and how harmful and dangerous and scary it is for trans people. And I really kind of needed a place to vent about it and talk about it, and also express my solidarity and my care and my concern towards my transgender brothers, sisters, and NB pals down in Tennessee specifically. So I kind of just want to ramble about it for a little bit and talk about why I think this recent bill in Tennessee is expressly harmful, dangerous, and concerning, not only for Tennessee, but for the for trans people just in general around the world. Earlier this week, the state of Tennessee passed House Bill 1182, a bill that requires any business within the state of Tennessee that allows transgender people to use the bathroom in their facilities to have to put up signage that states, and I'm going to read exactly what the signage has to state right off the page here, so I'm just looking right over here. The sign has to say, quote, "This facility has a policy of allowing the use of restrooms by either biological sex, regardless of the designation on the restroom." And this applies to locker rooms, showers, and dressing rooms as well, and it goes into effect July 1st, 2021, so a little over a month and a half from the filming of this video. So right up front, I just want to say I can understand if you're someone who is not up to date on, trans topics, or how trans people are marginalized, or hasn't really been focusing on these issues, how you might look at this law and not understand why I am, as a trans person, am so deeply concerned by it. I mean, I've even seen some people, even within my family, who have stated like, well, how is this any different than something like, in Seattle, where I live, when businesses put up like a rainbow flag or a transgender flag or a safe space sticker on the front of their buildings to say like, hey, this is a place that is welcoming and inclusive of trans people, LGBTQ people, different marginalized identities. How is that any different than that? Just saying like we're a business that welcomes people like this. Well, a few different things that kind of come into play with something like that. Number one, the place that I live in, Seattle, is a place that is generally accepting of LGBTQ identities and transgender identities. So for a business to put up a sticker like that, it's more affirming just to LGBTQ people and trans people to know that we are safe, and won't necessarily be a problem or a huge issue for the business at hand, to sort of publicly state these things. In a state like Tennessee, which is a much more conservative state, and sadly, conservative states tend to be more anti-transgender in their leanings. I'm not saying that everyone in the state of Tennessee is, a transgender bigot or hates transgender people or anything like that, but the sentiment against trans people is much harsher. And politically, because of this culture war idea that we've been having going on that has so expressly targeted trans people, there's this idea that like trans people are this ideological agenda trying to like hurt your women and hurt kids, and think of the children, and the Democrats and the liberals and the leftists just want to like convert your kids, and they're going too far with their transgender agenda because it's like harming these other groups. Because of that sort of sentiment that's been going on, this sort of like lies around and straw manning of transgender people and our positions and what we think about ourselves, and other people who want to interact with transgender people, because we've been so politicized in that way and sort of been kind of straw manned and lied about, frankly. These states, it is much more damaging and harmful to be publicly expressive of being trans inclusive. So for a business to have to put a sticker up that says, we include trans people, could be harmful to those businesses. Now, I'm not against businesses in these states being in fact, we need more businesses to be publicly supportive of transgender people, to say like, hey, we want to support transgender people. But to force this in areas that may not be safe, what that does then is it creates an incentive to not include trans people in your spaces. It creates an incentive for businesses to say, oh, maybe we don't want to include transgender people. Maybe we don't want to necessarily allow trans people to use the bathroom here, because that means we'd have to put up the signage, which might cost us business because the sentiment in this state is much more anti-transgender. So that is a major problem. Again, I'm not saying that businesses shouldn't be publicly supportive of trans people. They should, but I also understand the cost-benefit analysis of that, and sometimes it's worth just saying, like, look, you can come in here. We accept you as a trans person. We want you to have a safe space. We can't necessarily do that publicly, but we want you to know you're safe here. But being forced to do that now could fall back on these businesses and hurt these businesses, which again creates a financial incentive for them not to include transgender people. So it starts to create this space where transgender people are just not allowed out in public, when all we want to do is to go out in public and exist like anyone else and use the bathroom like anyone else. Transgender people just want to use the bathroom. What this does is it forces us to not be able to partake in society, to take part in these public spaces. It forces us to either be in the closet, to hide who we are, or to just generally not go out. It segregates us from society by forcing these spaces that are, non-transgender spaces, cis-only spaces. And I don't even need to tell you why it's a bad idea to segregate spaces based on just identity lines. The other thing too is the language of this signage that would have to go up, the sort of, we allow people of either biological sex to enter the bathroom, feeds into this false narrative around trans people, this dehumanizing narrative of trans people, and this vilification narrative of transgender people. There's this narrative that if we allow transgender people into the bathroom that they, quote unquote, believe themselves to be, anti-transgender's language there, that it will allow men to go into the bathroom and assault women there because we're allowing men into the bathroom now. Number one, this is subtly implying that trans women are not women, they are men going into the bathroom, which, again, that's this whole conversation. Trans women are women. We just want to use the bathroom. We are women who want to be seen as women in the bathroom. A lot of us look like women. A lot of us are, at very least, visibly trans. And so, people will see us and understand that we are trans and we are using the bathroom, or we'll just be seen as women. And also, even if we don't look like women, even if we're not looking, even if we don't clock as transgender people, if we don't pass as, visibly transgender, we just want to use the bathroom. And it shouldn't be a big deal that we just use the bathroom that we want. But it starts to play in this the idea that trans people are predators. Not to mention the fact that there's been no recorded cases of this, or very few recorded cases of this ever actually happening. And number two, even if we take trans people out of the equation and say like, oh, it's just men, it's not that we don't want trans people in the bathroom, we just don't want men in the bathroom. And number one, assault is illegal. So why are you litigating transgender people's rights when you should be saying like, oh no, assault is illegal and you shouldn't be assaulting anyone, something that is already on the books. It's like you're limiting trans people's rights because of something that an entirely different group that you're saying is doing it, that like non-transgender people might assault women. Why not just say assault is bad, which we already do? And also people who assault people, if men want to assault women, they're going to do it. They're not going to be, oh, well, there's a law that says I can't go into this bathroom now. I guess I won't do assaulting today. Like, that's not how that works. And so it's just a frank straw manning of the position overall, in general. And so that language feeds into this sort of like biological sex thing. It also feeds into this straw man idea that transgender people are ignoring biological sex, so we don't understand how biological sex works, that we're trying to deny science. Like, no transgender person is saying that we don't understand biological sex. I, most likely, and I've never been tested, by the way, so I actually don't know this to be true, and I don't think 99.9% of people know this to be true. So even the language is like, how do you even relegate that or know that or understand that specifically? But regardless, even understanding that, I most likely have, XY chromosomes. But if you look at me, like, I exist as a woman in the world. Like, no one's testing my biology whether or not they treat me as a woman. And yeah, I may be clocked as trans, but then I'll also be clocked, I may be seen as trans. And then I'll be treated as trans. I might be seen as a woman, regardless of if I'm trans or not. I might also be seen as trans. And that brings with it its own intersections of discrimination and identity that comes with that. And transgender people understand that. We do, deep down. We're not saying that biology doesn't exist, but we're just saying, like, look at me. Look at us. Look at how we exist in the world. Also, even if we don't look like we pass as the gender that we want this society to see us as, if we don't live by the norms of those genders, or we're non-binary, we just want to use the bathroom. But you're creating a situation where it's encouraging businesses to just not even allow us into these spaces. And to normalize that in states like Tennessee is deeply gross. And so that's the kind of point that I want to end on here, because what this is doing, and it's what I've already said, is it's feeding into this straw man idea of what transgender people saying are doing. It feeds into this idea that we are, we're predators trying to hurt people. So not only is it just ignoring what we're actually saying, it's lying about what we're actually saying. It's feeding into this idea that we're predators as well. And it just creates an incentive to not only businesses, but for ourselves to either put ourselves in the closet or just not go out in public spaces, to be less seen, to hide ourselves, to push ourselves away. And that brings with it its own sense, all of this, by the way, all of this brings with it its own sense of stigma that gets perpetuated within places like this, not just within people who are, maybe feeling anti-transgender stigmatization, but in trans people ourselves. The mental health harm of something like this, to go out as a trans person and see signs on doors saying like, oh yeah, we're this reminder of the straw manning of what we are and the stigmatization of what we are in society, to get reminded of that every day puts an already marginalized group who already faces a lot of mental health difficulties because of the stigmatization we face in pretty much all of society in numerous ways, and this internalized hatred that we may be pushing ourselves because of that stigma that we're taught since our birth. It adds another thing on top of that. And there's a reason that transgender people are more inclined to be suicidal, and it's not because we're trans, it's because how we are treated because we're trans, and this adds onto that pile. So not only is this just politically stigmatizing, I would not be surprised if stuff like this does not lead to direct deaths of transgender people who may, let's just be honest about it, might be more likely to commit suicide because of how stigmatized they are within Tennessee and states like this. All of that churn of awfulness constantly getting put on transgender people, it will have direct effects on people's lives, people living. And the people who do continue to live will face all this stigmatization that I've been talking about. This dehumanization that I've been talking about. These lies about what we're saying and who we are. And the fact that it's gotten normalized in Tennessee and has gotten passed in Tennessee creates another path for transgender people to be attacked and harmed within other states that are passing similar laws. Like, we've been seeing a rash of anti-transgender laws recently, namely around, puberty blockers for trans kids and trans-affirming healthcare for trans kids. Oh, think of the children. Oh, they're trying to hurt the children, when all trans people are really trying to do, I've done videos on this, is trying to just, be affirming towards transgender children and allow them a chance to choose and not harming them, but just of giving affirming healthcare that if they weren't trans, they would be able to get anyways for other issues, by the way. And then we've also seen this conversation around transgender people in sports, which I've also done a whole video on that you can check out, and I've done discussions on that as well. But, this just adds another thing. And it's honestly one of the more concerning ones. Like, as harmful as I think that transgender people in sports bills are, trans-affirming healthcare for trans kids are, those do affect subsets of the transgender community. I'm not saying that makes it better or worse. They're still horrible and disgusting. But something like this directly impacts every single transgender person. Again, the other ones do too in some way or another. It's limiting our rights overall, especially the youth, transgender youth, which are the most vulnerable. But this bill affects all transgender people, and we're starting to see escalations, is what this means. It's not going to stop at these things. It's not going to stop here. This is going to get worse, especially in these states, especially if they aren't stopped and pushed back against. And that's what's concerning me. This escalation, the harm, all of these things that I've talked about in this video. It's deeply concerning. And I would not be surprised if we won't see similar bills passed or at least pushed forward in other states in the United States, because it is a new template that people see that can be used against the transgender community. And again, as I've stated in numerous other videos, the only reason this is happening is not because of what trans people are actually saying or doing. It's not actually legislating like harm that we might be causing, because the harm that we're supposedly causing is all lies anyways, as I've talked about and illustrated in this video. The whole reason this is happening is to create a cultural wedge issue to try and get people who are pushing these laws to vote. It's saying, conservatives are saying in these states, hey, Don't worry about the economic bills. Don't worry about like the big infrastructure discussions that we're having in our society. Like, ignore those issues. Those aren't the real important issues, that we're talking about. The real problem is the transes that the Democrats support, that the liberals support, that the leftist socialists and communists support. We don't want the transes hurting your children and hurting your women or hurting you in the bathroom. No. So vote for us because we'll stop that and ignore all the other stuff too. It's just focusing on this issue and strawmanning trans people as a scapegoat in order to win votes and ignore other problems that are systemic and deeply ingrained within these states and within our country. And transgender people just become the next conversation piece so we don't have to focus on the actual issues that we want to talk about. And helps these people win votes because they sort of strawman us and paint us as the villains that they are fighting against. It's gross, it's disgusting, and it's wrong. And it's deeply, deeply horrifying and concerning. And I'll end on this final note here. I am a trans person that lives in a fairly privileged position when it comes to being trans. I live in a fairly trans-affirming state, and that's not to say I haven't faced transphobia, both online and in person. I definitely have. It sucks, and it's awful. But on the whole, I am someone who lives a privileged position. To all of my transgender brothers, sisters, and MB pals that live in these states and in these situations and in these countries like the United Kingdom where these things are much more expressly targeted and normalized and harmful, my heart goes out to you. And I stand in solidarity with you, and I'm thinking of you. I think especially most of our transgender kids, as well as transgender people of color who are, and especially black transgender people, who are, black transgender women even, who are the most vulnerable in situations like this. So I think of all of you. My heart goes out to all of you. I stand with all of you. And I don't know what else to say other than I send you love. Stand strong. You are lovely and beautiful and wonderful. And never forget that. This all sucks. It's horrible, and I'm so sorry that you have to deal with it. But never forget that you are absolutely fucking beautiful or handsome or amazing, whatever adjective that best fits you. I want you to know that's what you are. And I think that's the most important thing that I want to leave this with, for at least trans people. If you're not a trans person, you're watching this, please stand up for and speak out for transgender people. Call your representatives. Let them know that you think that this is horrible, especially if you live in Tennessee. Yeah, I think that's what I'll say on that note. So thank you so much for your time. I hope that you always live long and prosper. I will be having a much more exciting video coming out on Friday, a much more joyous video on Friday. I know we've been talking about a lot of hard topics, so don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more joyous topics, but also discussions of harder topics too. I also have a Patreon page that you can help support me at. But beyond all of that, I hope that you, as always, live long and prosper. I didn't start the Patreon, okay I did, but I didn't light it 'cause you all provided, so thank you to patrons. I'm gonna sing the list now and I hope you like it. Alexander Miller, Catherine Lambath, Miranda Janelle, Ashley Allen Bokikio, Eli Bermas, Sonia Taffer, Ashlyn Solstice, Greg Gillem, Stephen Clenard, Randy Thompson, Baba Ruski, Felicia Toast, Alexander Miller, Stephen Schuhart, Kate McTeakin, Wellington Marcus, Boyd and Mary Beth Earl Bass, James Krivda, Ish the Man, A Man Chooses, A Slave Obeys, John Cool, Dominic Noble, Buttoneer, Wu-Tan Fool, Jessica Wright, Peter Landers, Travis Ridge, John Steele, Meadow Whisperer, William Stewart, Joy A, Maggie the Goblin, Camille T, Ulysses the Pagan, Amanda Comet, Alex Owen, Jason Knott, Munir Amlani, BBD, Hannah F, John Weatherby, Hirius, Maeve Lamia, Nathan Steele, Bree Breacher, Andrew K, Sky Skinner, Sean Piper, Flynn, Tiffany Danger, Bush, Wendizzle Bizzle, Gretchen Badger, Geek Filter, Cast the Last, Janie Packard, Ellie O'Dare, Keith Briggs, Troy Stull, Sarah Bystam, Mari Neckar, Laura Demereau, W. Randy Edie, Lysa, Polly Mina Din, Pissed and Twisted Garage, Jacob Tovar, Sarah Sweeney, Jessica Chapman, Nikki Gordon Bloomfield, Mara Mack, Andrew Lamoureux, Celestial Dawn, Zone 1 Librarian, Jenny Marble, Michael Hardy, Pasty, Corey, and Vale Honkinen. Newt says hi to everybody, and we love you. Mwah.